This is the week that would be remembered as the week that the Fed pivoted. It's also the week that the seventh week that the S&P went up, and we are at all-time highs if you include the dividends. Let's summarize the week. Let's look at everything that happened this week, including news, markets, everything that you can expect. And then let's talk about the week ahead. Are you ready for it? Let's go. Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. I'm Micha Stocks, and on this channel we talk about the markets. We summarize the week, we look at the news, we look at the indices, the averages, and everything that we need to know. And a quick reminder that everything and anything that you see on this video is of course my personal view. It is not financial advice. It is only for educational and entertainment purposes only. And as you can see from the window outside, there's a lot of people that are having fun while I'm recording this video. So let's finish it quickly so I can go outside and ice skate. This is how the market behaved this week. The S&P is up 2.5%. Dow Jones, is up 3%. NASDAQ is up 3.3%. And the Russell up 5.5%. You can see this ridiculous climb that happened right after the Fed dot plot, right after the press conference. We're going to talk about that in about a minute. This is our weekly candles that you can see 7 weeks of seven green weeks for the S&P 500. These are Japanese candlesticks. 7 weeks of gains for the S&P. The interesting for this week, and I didn't include it here, is the fact that the S&P went up 2.49% is one thing, but when you look at the RSP, which is the 500 stocks on the S&P but divided equally, the RSP went up 3.8%, which means that during the week we got a wider participation of more and more companies in the S&P 500 and in the Russell and in the NASDAQ participating in the rally. And not only the Magnificent Seven, actually the Magnificent Seven didn't really behave that well. When you look at the heat map, this is how it looks like. This is from TradingView. You can see the heat map across the board. And when you look at Magnificent Seven, the best performer was actually Tesla. Why? Again, if Tesla went down due to Elon Musk's comments on the rates being too high, financial conditions being too tight, if the market expects, and you don't know it yet because I haven't mentioned it yet, but the market expects the Fed to cut rates, then Tesla stock can go up. Other stocks that went up were Nvidia, Amazon, and Apple, Meta as well. On the flip side, we have Microsoft and Google, which were negative for the week. And as you can see from this chart, we got better participation from other participating companies in the market. Crypto, Bitcoin is up another 3% and Ether is up another 1.2%, not because the ETF was approved. Actually, it wasn't approved yet, but mainly because there's optimism about it being approved in the future. When we look at all the different ways to slice the major averages, you can see that all of them are currently at whether they're overbought or extreme overbought. The way that this is calculated is standard deviations from the 50-day moving average. And as you can probably understand, if we had a huge rally in the last 7 weeks, it means that we are at the overbought or extreme overbought condition. This does not mean that the market can't keep pushing higher, but it does mean that your risk is just growing. Fear and greed from CNN's website is at 67, meaning that we're greedy, but not extremely greedy as of yet. And this brings us to the news. Pivot. Before the pivot, 36 hours before the pivot, we got our CPI print. CPI showed that we're seeing disinflation, not deflation, disinflation. What's disinflation? It means that we still have inflation, but it's lower than it was before. Whether we go year by year or year over year, we see November last year was 0.2, now it's 0.1. If we look at the year over year, we can see the chart coming down. And if we look at the core CPI, we can see that it went down as well. So why was the market this excited if we still have inflation? The reason for that is because the parts that impacted inflation the most were shelter and used cars. But we know from more advanced data, real-time data, and you'll see it in the news in a few minutes, that shelter and used cars are coming down. So the market actually interpret that as CPI keeping this pace or going down. And this brings us to Wednesday. Wednesday this week, 2 p.m. Eastern and then 2:30. The Fed came out and said, we are not raising rates. Even more than that, in their dot plot, in the paper that they predict, each one of them puts a circle where they think the rate is going to be in the next 5 years. You can see that if today in 2023 we are at 5.25, they're expecting this decrease in rates. But I want to put this under a very big disclaimer. Not my disclaimer, their disclaimer. They're never right. So anything and everything that you see here is not is it or isn't it the financial advice? It's just not going to happen. How do I know that? Well, it's pretty easy. September 2023, they expected another rate hike. We are December, 3 months later, no more rate hikes. This September 2023, they expected the average rate to be around 5%, 5 to 5.25. Now they expect 4.5%. What has changed in the last three months? I don't know, and probably you don't know. Only it might be that inflation came down and the market is feeling more and more tightened from their financial pressures, but that's the only thing. There are some rumors that the Fed is seeing something in the data and that's spooking him, but you can never know. Friday, Fed John Williams was sent to CNBC to say, guys, we're not really talking about rate cuts right now. Well, I'm sorry to tell you, John Williams, you might be a Fed president, but the dot plot says otherwise. That kind of spooked the market as well. Goldman sees the rates coming down from March already, very optimistic. And you can see here the chart coming down of rates, normalized rates and regular rates coming down to around 3.25, 3.5. I think that's going to go down even lower, but we'll see in the next few years. I'm going to be here, don't worry. PPI also came in this week. It came out as expected. No major news there. And GDP went back up. If last week we were around 1.4, now we are already at 2.6. So the American economy is still very, very strong and robust. And you can see that in the GDP. By the way, we might not be in this situation. We might see ourselves in a recession in 2024. There are enough signs to say that it might happen. But currently, the market is discounting the fact that rates are coming down. And by the market, let's start looking in at specific companies. And we have to start with a huge recall that Tesla initiated on Wednesday morning to almost all their US cars. A dramatic title, a dramatic push notification, a dramatic braking. But when you read the smaller fonts, you see that it's an over-the-air update. And that brings us to Apple, because Apple did an over-the-air security update also this week. Did you see Apple recalling all their iPhones? Of course not. Something needs to change in the terminology, because when Tesla can push out over-the-air updates, it's totally different than how the automotive environment operated thus far. Google lost their fight against Epic Games on the App Store, just like Apple lost it a few months ago. And if we're talking about Apple now in Europe, in the EU, is supposed to open their NFC, their near-field communication, in order for other companies to develop on top of that technology. Bloomberg cites problems for Apple, with China banning the iPhone usage in agencies, government-backed firms, and others. This, if it's true, might hurt Apple's sales in a very strong way. 25% of the iPhone sales are done in China, and if you can't bring your phone to work, why would you buy an iPhone? Ford sees problems with their P&L, and due to the problem with their P&L, they're identifying that the new F-150 Lightning, the EV pickup, is a losing money car. And by it being a losing money car, by the way, it makes sense because it's relatively new. There's no economy of scale yet. they can't stand the loss because they're right now in a very difficult financial situation. So what they're doing, they're cutting 50% of the F-150 development and production for 2024. Does that mean that the Cybertruck can pick up? Very good question. This brings us to Hasbro, that is seeing the economy slowing down as well, especially the toy sales, and they're cutting 20% of their labor, 1,100 employees. An analyst sees a LiDAR company called Innoviz, ticker INVZ, whopping or going up 400% because they have very good technology and they are working with BMW. That stock, of course, gained double digits this week. Nvidia's CEO wants to open new factories. 2 weeks ago it was in Japan. A week ago it was in Vietnam. He wants to find a way to produce outside the US in order to ship to China without all the problems coming from the US government. Macys receives almost a $6 billion buyout offer, which would take them off the public markets. Currently, they haven't accepted the deal. They believe they're worth a lot more than that, which is only before the news, it was only 20% upside on the current price. Now they're kind of hovering on that price. And the interesting part of that is that Brigade Capital Management, the firm that wants to acquire Macys, actually wants to acquire for the real estate, not for their business. Macys, a very, very known brand for ages, might not be worth anything except the real estate. Interesting. This brings us to Redfin. If we're talking about real estate, Redfin sees that the tides have turned and the renters are asking rents that are lower than 3 years ago. And we're also seeing in Manhattan a 2% decrease in rents. It's not a dramatic nominal number, but it does show a trend that brings us back to CPI and why people believe that CPI will keep coming down. Etsy is going to eliminate 11% of their headcount. Usually that brings a stock to go up. In Etsy's case, it actually dropped 11%. And the reason for that is because their CEO, Josh Silverman, mentioned that he is doing that because he's citing very challenging environment. Combine Etsy, Hasbro, and others, maybe there will be a recession in 2024. I don't know. We should be very aware of that and keep following the channel. And if we're talking about the channel, it's a good opportunity to mention that if you like everything that you saw, you can subscribe to the channel and turn notifications on. And by that, you will be notified every week that I post the weekly videos. And thank you, of course, for the ones that are subscribed. Let's keep on going with Foxconn, taking another 300 acres and trying to build a factory there. They will invest around $1 billion. And you know what Foxconn produces, right? iPhones. iPhone is reducing their dependency on China slowly but surely. And GM, they're laying off 900, which is 24% of their Cruise employees. Cruise is their autonomous driving unit. And they're also reducing 1,300 of their Michigan workers from the vehicle production. So GM is seeing financial stress. Ford is seeing financial stress. Basically, it seems like Apple is the only game in town. But if we're talking about car companies, Rivian, after they stopped their exclusivity with Amazon, they are now shipping their van to others like AT&T. We probably will see more and more companies adapting their van because it works. Amazon is probably very satisfied, and others. Pfizer, on the other hand, sees that the demand for COVID vaccine is dropping like a rock, and the business that was very hyped from the COVID vaccines and connecting it to the flu shot is seeing a rapid decline, and they're lowering their guidance for 2024, which, of course, created pressure on the stock, and the stock went down during the week. And the partner for the COVID vaccines, Moderna, actually saw a whopping gain on Friday. The reason for that is they are in, or their tests for a cancer vaccine is proving to be very effective. And they, on the optimistic side, believe that they're going to launch it 2025. and that's why the stock Moderna went up during trading on Thursday and Friday. Intel is unveiling their new AI chip. They believe that they're saying, that it's being already implemented in a lot of new PCs out there. I personally do not really understand why a PC needs an AI chip, but maybe companies will try to do something on board rather than on the cloud. Usually AI capabilities need a lot of data, which means that you should use it on the cloud rather than on-prem, but maybe Intel sees a market that I'm not aware of. That ticker is INTC. And XPeng, ticker XPEV, a Chinese car producer, saw their stock coming down on Friday. The reason for that is Alibaba, ticker Baba, has disclosed that they want to cut their stake in the company. And this will impact CPI, but on a different direction. After Zim, the Israeli company, now Maersk, the Swedish company, both shipping companies are stopping their routes through the Red Sea. The reason is because of the Yemeni Houthis that are shooting missiles and drones, suicide drones, at these ships. And no one wants to risk their ships, so they're changing the routes. This will increase the cost for routes. This will increase the cost for goods. And it will impact economies, mainly Europe and the Middle East. Might not impact US. Maybe it might impact on the Panama Canal because there will be more ships going through. We'll see that. And we'll see who's going to deal with the Houthis. Very strange name. And the last piece of information or news for this week is Costco. You remember I showed this a few months ago that they're selling a 1 ounce bar of gold can you believe that they sold more than $100 million worth of gold bars last quarter? That's crazy amount. People are really stacking up gold. By the way, from historical perspective, gold is never created wealth, by the way. When you compare it to anything else, it doesn't. So unless you're expecting a zombie apocalypse, and then again, what would you do with gold if no one can use it? Then not really clear why people are stacking ounces of gold. But maybe, again, I'm missing something. Maybe something very severe is about to happen in the world. And that was all the news that we had for this week. Let's quickly go over next week, which is the last week that we will have full 5 trading days. Why? Because Christmas is falling on Monday next week, which means that it's going to be a short week. These are the companies that are reporting this week. On Tuesday, we're going to have FedEx. Wednesday, we're going to have General Mills and Micron. And Thursday, we're going to have Nike and Carnival Cruise. By the way, it means that in 2 weeks, we're going to have a new round of reports. This brings us to the calendar itself, the economic calendar. There aren't any special things happening except the PCE on Thursday. The PCE is the Fed's preferred inflation report. That's going to happen. And when we look at the S&P 500 to the Japanese candlesticks, we can see that we have gone up from October 27 all the way to Thursday, where we got to 47.30, 17%. This rapid increase, we know why it happened. The belief that the Fed is going to cut rates, the belief that we're going to see easing of financial conditions. But when you look at the S&P, the latest price action might hint that we might see a bit of a correction to around 45.90, around 46. It's not dramatic. It's less than 100 points on the S&P. But that correction will ease a few of the indicators and will help all the money managers that now need to chase the market. Hopefully, we're going to lose these 100 points in the next Monday, Tuesday, and then we'll let the Santa rally start, because Santa rally is supposed to start on Friday, 5 trading days, and then 2 trading days into the year ahead. We'll be here to cover it. So if you enjoyed everything you saw, smash that like button. You can share with your friends. I'm Micha Stocks. See you next week. Trade well. Bye-bye.